everyone, and welcome to the Jeff Willis Show. Today I have with me Sam Jacobs. Now, Sam is the founder and CEO of Pavillion, a community-powered learning platform for go-to-market leaders and teams. It's also known by the acronym GTM, which is not gross trailer mass, it's go-to-market. So I just want to make sure we're clear on this with all our folks. So
Sam, I know nothing about trailers, Jeff.
Well, I don't even own one either, so it's fine. Sam launched Pavillion as a revenue collective in 2016 and bootstrapped the company to a 10 million in annual recurring revenue before taking on a 25 million growth financing round led by Elephant Ventures and GTM Fund. Pavillion is powered by an international community of more than 10,000 sales, marketing, RevOps, and success leaders of the world's fastest growing companies. Everyone at Pavillion teaches new skills, forges meaningful connections, and helps companies grow. Pavilion University leverages a proprietary immersive learning framework to fuse structured training with ongoing social learning and just-in-time resources that drive results. Prior to Pavillion, Sam spent 15 years as a senior revenue leader at VC-backed companies in the New York area, including Gerson, and he's dialing in from New York. Welcome to the show, Sam. It's an absolute pleasure.
Thank you for having me, Jeff. It's wonderful to talk to you today. Thanks for having me.
It's an absolute pleasure. Now, Sam's just released a new book called Kind Folks Finish First. And I have read part of it, not all of it. And it is really, a lot of it aligns with what I believe in as well. And we're going to touch on some of the things that he values, the things he's learned along the way, which the book is his story and also what he learned along the way and what he shares with the world. And it's fascinating. So, Sam, what was the driver to starting Pavillion? What was it? Was it desperation? Was it inspiration? Or was it both?
Well, I would say closer to desperation than inspiration. That's for sure. So, right. As you mentioned in my bio, and I apologize that we gave you such a long and labored bio, but I've been building companies here in New York for 20 years, and from 2010 to 2018, I was in senior leadership roles at, startups, at kind of venture capital backed high growth companies. And it was a job that I'd never done before. It was a job that, we're all good salespeople in the sales profession. So you're good at selling yourself into the job. Yep. But the job description itself is not persistent. It means different things based on what company you're in. And it was also, the world was changing so rapidly and is only changing more rapidly today because of technology. And so I needed a support group. That's what I needed. I needed other people to talk to that were facing the same challenges. And for whatever reason, the communities that were out there didn't really serve my people in that way. And so back in 2014, I started bringing people together in New York City. There was never, there was never any grand master plan. I'm sure you might talk to some founders or CEOs or people that have started companies. And, from the minute that they started this vision of where it would be in 10 years, that's not what it was for me. For me, it was, I needed help. And so I started bringing people together for dinner every quarter to just talk about our challenges, talk about what we faced. And again, never thinking that it would be a company, because it's a dinner club and those are pretty easy things to copy. But for whatever reason, there wasn't that kind of club in New York City, one of the biggest cities in the world. And so I gave it a name. At the time, we called it Revenue Collective. It has since been changed to Pavillion. And we just started sharing ideas and best practices with each other. It was actually free as well at the time. Now, over 2018, people started hearing about it from all over the world. And I got emails from people in London and from Amsterdam and from Toronto. And so, and I don't know how they heard about us, but they heard that we were doing something interesting and they wanted to be a part of it. And so we expanded globally pretty quickly. In fact, we do have a reasonably sized chapter in Sydney, down in Oz, in addition to Singapore, sort of, our Asia Pacific presence. And then the sort of milestone or inflection point was, meanwhile, as I'm starting this group and we're coming together and sharing best practices and ideas, I'm getting fired all the time. And certainly that's in the book. And so obviously, the group helped me find the next job, that's for sure. But by the last time I was fired from my last full-time job, which was which was 4 years ago, I realized that this might be a thing that I needed to work on full time. And so I've been working on it full time for 4 years because I felt like generally I'm unemployable to other companies. And so I guess I needed to be a CEO because I couldn't keep a job anywhere else. And so I've been working on it full time for 4 years. And since then, it's been more inspiration. But the inception was desperation.
Right. You mentioned some of the reasons why you got fired from your job, and you sort of hinted at that maybe at the time you were a grumpy bastard and were complaining all the time. Is that correct?
I would say that is correct. I have this, I don't know if you've ever been in this kind of relationship, but I, unfortunately, for better or for worse, I've been in this kind of romantic relationship where you fight, you get the sense that your partner wants to fight, but neither of you is leaving the relationship and neither of you is deciding to stop fighting and just get along.
Right.
And those are toxic relationships. And that was the kind of employee I was, right? I was always disgruntled. I always thought I was smarter than the boss and that I knew better. But I never just said, okay, well, if I think that's true, then I should go start my own company. So it's kind of like the most toxic kind of person because I'm the person that's sort of pissing and moaning in the corner, but not actually
doing anything.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I'm doing some stuff, but it's like, it's if you one of the things I realized that just was hard for me as an independent kind of like iconoclast is like when you work for somebody else, you are working in service of their vision. You just are. And
Yes.
if they're the founder, it's their company. It's not your company. They might call you a partner sometimes. They might give you some equity or some shares, but it's their company. And that's okay. You just have to get on board with that deal. And if you're not on board with that deal, that's not their problem. That's your problem. And so I was a grumpy bastard and I had a problem. And my problem was that I didn't want to accept the reality that if I wanted to be in charge, I needed to take the risk and I needed to do my own thing. So yeah, it's been, this is one of the reasons why I kept getting fired. Now there are other reasons too, but one of the lessons of the book is like, hey, you're not a victim. This isn't, life isn't happening to you. For the most part, you are the responsible for the things that are happening in your life. And, that's been the journey for me over the last, 15 years.
So the reality is that if you hadn't failed and been fired so many times, you wouldn't be where you are today.
And I 100% agree with you. And that's why even in the book, I've been divorced. This is my second marriage. I'm grateful for every single experience. I really am, because it led me here. And even in the book, I talk about getting fired. I tell some of the stories, but I really try to make it clear that like I don't view these people as evil people. The CEOs that fired me, they were doing the best that they could with the information that they had. And I learned something every single time, and it made me who I was. And I'm grateful for it. If I'd never had any of those experiences, I wouldn't have ended up here. And I'm glad where I am today, and I'm happy finally. And so, yeah, I'm grateful for it.
Yeah, certainly that's what I've learned along the way is that you learn more from pain than pleasure. And as long as you're willing to learn from it, and that's the attitude to failure, I think. And some people like scream at the world for their entire lives. Some go, well, there's a lesson here. How can I learn from this? And how can I grow from it? And it sounds like you've done that brilliantly.
I agree with you 100%. And I think, I just think that that a lot of people think, and it goes the same with luck. I consider myself lucky, but whether you think you're lucky or you're unlucky, you're right. It doesn't, these are just stories that we tell ourselves. You can say you're the luckiest man alive because you survived some tragic accident where you lost a loved one, but you still made it, you still survived. And then somebody can, have a car drive by and splash muddy water on their dress and say that, it was me. It's just up to you how you define the narrative of your life.
Exactly. And that's an attitude. It's a mindset. Definitely.
Exactly.
Yeah. So obviously you moved on from grumpy to great, which is fantastic.
I'm still grumpy. Don't worry. I temper it better.
I love the book because it's honesty. Now, one of the things you mentioned was that you got a coach to help you, Jim Rosen.
Yep.
And it helped you, I suppose, get some focus in your life. Can you tell me a bit about that story, because I was fascinated by it and thought it was great in terms of how he led you to move beyond money to values and let that drive you, or tap into it and discover it. So tell us about what happened there with Jim Rosen as a coach and around that.
I'm happy to. So yeah, I mean, that was the second to last job where I was fired. That was a company called the Muse. And I'd hired a coach because, once again, I felt myself in hot water. I there's this thing that happens when you're or a thing that happens to me, at least, when you're a startup executive. The initial couple months are always wonderful. It's the honeymoon period.
Yeah.
And then the last couple of jobs I've had, there's just been like, and it's almost in the moment. It's almost like on a day, you walk into work one day and you realize something changed. And you're alone in a way that you didn't feel alone before.
Right.
And it's probably because the CEO is getting ready to fire you. So, which is of course what happened. So I hired a coach to just try and help me navigate my career, because it wasn't going the way I wanted it to go. And he said, so we met in our first meeting, and he says to me, "So what do you stand for?" And I never heard that question before. And I thought it was, silly at first. I said, what does it matter? I stand for making money. I am trying not to work for these assholes and to work for, and to like retire at some point. So I stand for wealth creation. And he said, well, that's not a good answer. That's not enough. That standing for making money, in fact, doesn't help you make money. Money comes after you do the work. Money is the exhaust of your good work. It is not the input unto itself, unless maybe you work in finance. And that was a light bulb moment for me. And so we went on this, and he had this exercise that he did where we identified a bunch of different pillars, and we figured out, where did I find energy, and what were my core values, and where did I really draw inspiration. And at the end of this multi-week process, I came out of it with this vision statement, with this statement for what I stood for, the answer to the question. And my statement was, I stand for helping people I care about and respect achieve their professional potential, achieve their goals. And that's because I reflected on how much, where I got, besides the work every day of running sales teams, which, frankly, wasn't always what my favorite thing to do in the world was. What I really, really liked was helping people. And that sounds a bit cliche, but it was true. I liked helping people find jobs. I liked being a resource for people. And what I really, really liked was I liked doing all of those things and not asking for anything in return, just doing it because it helped differentiate me. It helped me stand out by not being the person that was a chiseler, that was asking for, every last penny of every transaction anytime you created value. So I got this vision statement, and lo and behold, if we zoom forward, that happened in 2017, in October of 2017. So it's 5 years later, about, just over 5 years from that moment. That is exactly the mission statement of my company. That is what Pavillion stands for. That is what we do. Our mission statement is we help our members unlock and achieve their professional potential, which is, almost to the word what that statement was that came out of that values exercise that I did with Jim Rosen. And, sometimes you do these things and you think, well, that's nice, but you can't really make money doing that. And I will say, to you, Jeff, and to your audience, I am continually surprised at how you can make money, how many ways you can make money doing things that you love. And I'll give you one funny example. And I don't mean this in any gender specific way. This is just my wife, right? My wife loves to shop. She really she likes nice things very, very much. And I think about, well, I like helping people. I built a company helping people, but there's no possible way that my wife can get paid to do what she loves, which is to shop. Well, my wife just opened a jewelry store, a fine jewelry store here in New York City. And what she does is she goes around and she finds beautiful things manufactured by other designers, and she sells them. She's like a multi-brand retailer. And she has somehow created a job where she gets paid to shop. She gets paid to shop, and she gets paid to help other women feel beautiful about themselves and to look their best and to be proud. And that was just one more example of, wow, if she could, if my wife can get paid to do what she loves in that way, then maybe anybody can. Maybe there's a way, more ways than we think, where you can align what gives you energy with what pays the bills.
I love that. And I read at the beginning of your book and you've just summed it up too. There are many paths to success. And that is so true, because we sort of get this idea that there's only one path for you. It's almost infinite. It's just trying to find which one is hidden within the granite that you are going to carve out. And this also comes to what you've done and what you're helping people do and it's also what I learned from your book, observed in your book, was the joy of creating. And you talked about choosing joy. And you also described the fact that one of the ways that gave you joy initially with one of your other past failures, which was becoming a music media mogul, is that you love music, and you said that what you really loved was just getting an idea or a sound and then turning that into a song. In other words, it might evolve over months until finally you've crafted a song. And I think for me, observing, reading in your book, was that you are choosing joy. In other words, and I think you also reframed doing what you love is sometimes not understood properly. Do you have something to add to that in terms of, because it's do what you love and everything will just be, sing kumbaya, but hidden within that is doing something I think you're good at, enjoy, and do something that brings you joy, raises your energy, which you've used a couple of times as well. So is there anything you'd like to add to that, the creator, or any of the things I've just said?
Well, I think you're making we're talking about stuff I wrote about. So obviously I think you're making good points, Jeff, but nevertheless, I think you're making some good points. Here's what I think. I think I talk about in the book, right? There's like, if you're thinking about career, right? You're thinking about making money. You're thinking about like supporting yourself and creating something that's productive that the world values.
That's right.
And I say that people, there's sort of a three components: what you're good at, what you're interested in, and where the market is moving.
Yep.
And most people overweight what they're interested in, and they underweight what they're good at and where the market is moving. And I then add my own little take on it, because that's from somebody else. But the other part I would say is that people don't define what they're interested in properly, right? And so what do I mean by that? And I use the example of the record label. So some people say, like, I don't like sales. And you're like, well, what does that mean? It's like, I don't like accounting. Well, which part? Like, sales is a bunch of different activities.
Yeah.
Sales is talking to people. Sales is a sort of a transactional kind of job where you get instant results. You get a lot of quick feedback, right? You either make the sale or you don't. You get you're ranked, and so some people really like that competition. But defining it so broadly, because it sort of feels I don't know, because you feel like you're afraid to dig a little deeper, I think it obscures your ability to discover where you find energy that maps to the market, that maps to an area that society wants you to work on, because they will pay you to do it, because because it serves some kind of value for them. And the point that I make when it comes to writing songs, because you're right, I am first, I was a media mogul and failed. Now I'm a probably nominally more successful songwriter. And I'm not a professional songwriter, meaning like I just can't pay, for whatever reason, I'm not good enough to pay my bills writing songs. And so once somebody might say, oh, well, wouldn't you love to go back to being in a band? And my point is, I don't really miss it. Why is that? Well, because I find joy, like you said, in terms of like that part of what are you interested in and what do you like doing? It's not just the music that I'm interested in. I'm interested in the act of creation. I'm interested in the act of having an idea and then seeing that idea over time, particularly over time, right? Because it's not about instant gratification. It's about this journey that you're on of bringing this thing. And music is a good example, because, you're screwing around with your acoustic guitar and, you got a couple chords and you come up with something. And then there's a moment when you hear it in your head, and maybe it's got strings, maybe there's horns, maybe there's like actually good musicians and a piano player that's competent, unlike me. And you hear it in your head, and then you go about the next couple of months pursuing the creation of that thing that you heard in your head. And it takes a long time, and it's not instant. And of course, by the time it finally is finished, you're completely bored of the song and you've written 30 new songs. But that same fulfillment, I get that joy almost every day. You know, I get that joy from helping create this business. I get that joy from the sense of autonomy and agency I have as the founder of this company, and knowing that this is my work, this is my art, that like people, that it's really kind of hard now to tell me what to do, which I never liked in the first place. And I get to work on these ideas with great people, and they bring my ideas to life in ways that I couldn't have imagined. And that's the same thing as bringing in a great piano player and having him or her write some line that you never even thought of that complements your chord progression perfectly. So my point is, like, yeah, I think people, they say do what you love. That doesn't mean that if you love poetry, you can be a professional poet. But you have to figure out, why do you love poetry, and are there elements of that thing that brings you joy that might be put to use where the market is moving, where there are more productive, where society will reward you for the work that you're doing. And yeah, and I think that that's way more possible again than people think, because like in the previous example, it's like, well, literally just walking around to people, like introducing them to other people in the spirit of helping them. Maybe I couldn't make money, but I built a business that was able to monetize the ideas that brought me energy and joy. And I think that that's more possible than people think.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. And I think you've got to be patient and play the long game on this and enjoy every day's creation, I think, which is what you've just mentioned. There's a great philosophy out of Japan called Ikigai. And you actually summed it up in even a simpler way. In other words, I think Ikigai is, what are you good at? What do I enjoy doing? And what will the world pay me for? Right. And which is what you summed it up as. Ikigai adds a couple more dimensions to that, but it doesn't really matter. You've summed it up perfectly, and I love it. I think it's so on course. So, all right. So what I also love is that you worked out how to take an idea and then take it to the world. In other words, create it. A lot of people have ideas. Ideas are cheap, but they actually, not many people act on it. So here you are. So you decided in about 2017, I think it was, to take your failure, learning from it, what you enjoyed doing, what you were good at. And then you were starting to look for a market, and you started consulting, didn't you? And prior to that consulting, you documented your expertise. Tell us a little bit about the documenting your expertise, and then we're going to talk a little bit more about how you created a business model that could scale at Pavillion. So tell us about that, documenting your expertise and what you did.
Well, sure. Well, you know, and I, by the way, you know, because we have like 10,000 members now in Pavillion all over the world. And so I still, much of my day is still doing one-on-one consultations, like coaching conversations, just because the point of the company is like trying to help people in a time of need. So literally today I had a conversation with somebody that's like, I want to go out on my own. I think I want to, you know, but I'm scared and I'm not sure what to do or how to do it. And so to the point of, you know, of what you asked, Jeff, that my answer, which is the same piece of advice. And by the way, this was advice that actually my wife gave me, because I was thinking, I'm so sick of these bastards. I need to make some of my own money. How am I going to do it? What should I do? And she said, why don't you spend time writing down everything you know about running a company? Why don't you just take this moment? You know, it was on a Tuesday because I'd been fired on a Monday, you know, and just document all of the opinions that you have about how to build a company, because I sensed that I wanted to try consulting. Ultimately, Pavillion is not a consulting business, but really the consulting effort for me was about taking a leap of making my own money. And so, you know, it was this process, and I really encourage everybody to do it. I probably encourage them to do it, you know, over the course of their career rather than just in one fell swoop. But the idea of like, okay, like you know more than you think you know. Sometimes we have this inner monologue that, you know, we're not good enough, we're not succeeding, we don't really know that much. And the reality is a lot of us have a lot of wisdom and experience. You mentioned, like a phrase that I think about. There's only one way to learn something, which is the hard way, right? Which is through pain. And so we've all learned a lot of things the hard way. So let's document all of the things that we've learned. So I spent a bunch of time just dropping down all of these ideas that I had. And ultimately, those things became a product that I sold in my consulting business, which was like a company diagnostic tool. Basically, I took all of my ideas about how to run a company and I turned it into this scorecard that I could then use to go into a company and say, let me rate your company on how well you're doing against these critical dimensions, and you'll pay me to do it. And it worked really, really well. And so, I think the lesson there is like, one of the things I've discovered, which is sort of an odd observation perhaps, but we assume, human beings, you and me, or maybe you and me are different, but many people, for me, for a long time, I assumed that my thoughts were in complete sentences, and they're not. They're actually not. My thoughts are they're fragments, and they're pictures, and they're words. So my point is, when I think I have a complete sense of all of the things that I know because it's in my head, I don't. And the act of documentation, the act of getting it out of your head onto a piece of paper or into a microphone, but some way of memorializing it, it becomes far richer and more complete than you think. You might think, oh, I don't know that much. I don't have that much interesting to say. Well, let's start getting it out and we can figure out afterwards if that's actually the truth. So for me, documentation, besides being a useful exercise just to get in the habit of writing and understanding yourself and some introspection and awareness, it also helps memorialize your expertise, your wisdom, your experience in a way that I found to be quite useful later in life.
Yeah, I love that insight about actually taking what's in your head and documenting it. And a lot of people don't realize how much expertise they really do have until they take the time to sit down and document it. And one of the joys I have in where time stops or slows right down is writing. And what I love about the craft of writing is that you've got to take what's in your head, which you said is in messy snippets and words and visuals, and put them down on a piece of paper. And then you're going to go, does this make sense if someone read this? And also there is so much learning in that, because you suddenly go, well, I need to research a little bit more here. So for me, just like you've done, that really resonates, because I write to learn and also write to communicate. So it makes sense. And then also the structure of that, to keep it as simple as possible, so that, and not use big words. And that is just the art and craft of documenting, writing. Is a lot of people, I think I would encourage everyone to do that a lot more. And
I completely agree. And I mean, this is an even weirder suggestion, but I also strongly recommend more people talk to themselves, because sometimes people think writing is, it's intimidating to some people. But again, same thing. I found that I can come and reach certain conclusions. I obviously do this away from other people, so I don't seem completely insane. But actually literally talking out loud, talking through a problem with myself and almost creating two opposing, narratives out loud helps me figure out what I actually think. Because again, sometimes you think you know what you think, but again, it's half formed. It's not fully formed. And the act of putting it out into the universe in some way actually helps you clarify your thoughts.
I totally agree. I think there's a power in verbalization. And I think there's two aspects of that on reflection, is that there's a power of verbalization with yourself by doing it out loud. And also there's a power of verbalization in a conversation, where as you communicate and talk to someone, the ideas seem to come out of almost nothing, out of the universe, as you verbalize. Because by verbalizing, you actually are creating.
Exactly.
And so now, the other thing that I loved too was an observation about early on, you decided with your consulting and you got your first gig that you didn't charge for time, but for a product. Now, I think that's really important to make to there's a lot of consultants out there, and they are always trading time for money. Whereas you early on, almost from the get-go, said, I'm going to create a product that I sell. And I believe you went from not quoting a time hourly rate, but a product that a 5-day diagnostic interview the sales team. So tell us a bit more about that and how that's maybe fed into Pavillion and how you have scaled what you do.
Well, I mean, to your point, right? Like I'm always, being a consultant was fun. It's fun to go in to other people's companies and not really have any your butt on the line, whether your ideas work or not, right? And I just remember consulting for some really terrible companies and thinking, man, I am so glad I am not a full-time employee here. And oh, it's 4:59 p.m. I will see you tomorrow. Oh, that thought, like good luck with this disaster that is your company. But relatedly, I felt like there's I was always focused on scalability. I was always focused on, and my problem with consulting was like it's how do you scale it? How do you reach beyond yourself? Because if you're always just trading your hourly rate, it becomes difficult. Now, fundamentally, if you're a one-person show, it is still time for money. That is still but how do you present it differently in such a way that you can, because the only way to scale a one-man or one-person consulting business is to charge more for less time. And so my rule, first and foremost, which is, if you have any consultants out there, I refused, because I met with a bunch of consultants. I was doing some research and my friends were consulting. I charge $125 an hour. I charge $250 an hour. And I'm like, I'm just not doing that. I'm not gonna, I felt like it cheapened me in a way that, and it didn't create any kind of replicability. So to your point, the next step after documenting everything I know is I created that diagnostic tool. And so then I started selling the tool, and I said, hey, this scorecard, this process takes 5 days and $1,000. And and obviously there's an implied day rate there, which is I guess like $2,200 or something like that. But or maybe it's $2,400. But the point is, it's more, I probably wouldn't have gotten $2,400 a day if I said that's my day rate. And then what I did was I took that same tool and I just said, well, now it takes 3 days and it's $15,000. And all of a sudden I'd raised my day rate to $5,000 a day. And but I was still selling a product, right? People didn't think about it like that. They thought about, so how do you create it? So I was focused on, okay, I want to create templatized, repeatable deliverables that I can give to people over time, and that they can, and that have the appearance of authority and credibility and objectivity. And that's why I spent all this time building this diagnostic tool, because otherwise it's just like, well, let me take a look at your company and I'll tell you what I think. But this is no. I've created the scientific process. I've been in the laboratory for 10 years and this is the result. This is my beautiful thing that I've created from that laboratory. And, for me, I mean, how do those ideas relate to Pavillion? I'm always just interested in what can we repeat? How do we take experiences that are ad hoc, that are one-off, that are ephemeral, and can we create something that builds upon itself? And that's, more than even consulting or productization, the main thing I'm such a passionate advocate of is recurring revenue. I am
subscription models.
Yeah, it's just the best. It's also the most humane way to build a company. And I say that because what a subscription definitionally implies that you're providing ongoing value to your customer. And if you stop providing that value, they stop paying your subscription. And that completely aligns your incentives with your customers. Your goal is, how do I build stuff that keeps them sticking around? And they're the final arbiters and everyday judges of whether you're doing that successfully. And it's just a way, and of course, there's a bunch of benefits from like running a bit from an operational perspective, but fundamentally, I find that it aligns the company and the customer more effectively than any other kind of payment model.
Right. Yeah, subscription model has become almost everyone's trying to work out. Almost everyone's trying to work out how to do that from whatever they're doing, and even comes down to there's subscription models even for products such as shavers. That was one of the and there's subscription models everywhere now, and also it increases the value of a company because you're not basing it on project, having to win a new job every project every day. It's recurring monthly revenue that's predictable. And as an entrepreneur, that allows you to sleep a little bit better at night, because it's more.
And it allows you to invest. That's the whole thing, is that like it allows, because you have a better sense for what will happen tomorrow, you can make plans.
Right.
Whereas if you have no idea what's going to happen tomorrow, then you're just stuck waiting for tomorrow every day.
Yeah, exactly. Now, tell us, I'm always intrigued by business models. So you started with a certain business model and you're always thinking about scalability as a consultant. And part of that was creating a product that was scalable, replicable. And the thought and inspiration is to keep doing that with almost everything you do within that. So in having a look at Pavillion, it appears that you have two areas. One is a community where you charge a subscription, I believe, for that. And the other one is Pavilion University, which is training. Is that the two core pillars of what Pavillion is about?
Yeah, effectively. I mean, it's interesting. So, Pavillion started as a community, right? With very, very strong word of mouth, right? So other people would pay to be members of the community and say, hey, Jeff, you got to join this thing. It's great. And you'd say, what does it do? What do I get for my money? And they're like, don't worry about it. It's great. And you're like, well, I trust you, Sam. Fine. Here's my money. That worked at the beginning when you had such strong word of mouth that everybody felt really compelled. But as you try to grow, as you try to scale, as you try to add thousands of customers, not just hundreds of customers, something happened to us. And it really happened this year, which is people say, well, I'm not getting what I thought I would get. And we say, well, what did you think you would get? And they list a bunch of things. And we say, oh, well, that's not what we. It turns out that community is a really ambiguous category without clear ROI, clear return on investment. And so this year we figured out, well, what can we build that references community, but is a much cleaner, has a more understandable value proposition. Going back to, my wife, not to use her example all the time, but she started this jewelry store. She says, I love selling jewelry because everybody knows why gold and diamonds are expensive. I don't have to explain it. If I was selling some $2,000 dress, I would have to explain why this $2,000 dress is $2,000 and why you couldn't just buy it at H&M for $50. Everybody understands what online training and taking a class online means. And there's a lot of different expectations around what a community is. So we realize that the heart of the business is if we can build courses using our community, meaning using practitioners to teach these courses, because they're doing the jobs themselves every day, and you take these courses with other people, then the community can be the same community that you get from going to, secondary school, from university, which is the community of the people that you have that shared experience with, that you took the class with, that you learn that life skill with. And so that's where Pavilion University came from. And now the category that we talk about is called community powered learning. And so the business is, but to your point, Jeff, there's still effectively two businesses. The first business is the executive business, which is learning plus still interesting experiences among peers. And what that does is brings the rest of the teams into the organization. So we have two businesses. We have an executive business, which is focused on the CEOs and executives that run companies, and they get learning plus a bunch of other stuff, mainly peer networking. And then everybody else just gets learning. And so those are effectively, but fundamentally, I never thought that that's what I was building. But what I'm really building is an education technology business. That's what it is. That's what it turns out, because that is the way to productize community in a way that has clear, tangible benefits than just calling it community.
Yeah, very interesting. I had a chat with a young lady in Silicon Valley who sold her business called Vibely to Kajabi, and she her concept was building communities that matter and lead to happiness. And she's developed, and on the platform, she developed what she called engagement metrics. And I said, well, so she would say, okay, how many comments are being left? How much interaction are they doing? And so there's actually a metric for community engagement. In other words, it's a bunch of engagement metrics. And on top of that, then I said, well, how do you get the community engaged? And she said, well, the number one thing we use, this I found really insightful. She said, we keep people accountable by having challenges. In other words, a 7-day meditation challenge. And that was really quite fascinating. And it's really interesting to hear what you said about community, is that the benefit is this sort of amorphous, massive cloud that you're not quite, people say, well, what's the point? Even though they know that the end benefit down the track. A lot of people think short rather than long still. Yeah. But that was really interesting in terms of building technology that allowed to build communities online. And that raises the next question for me. How much of your business is online today?
I would say 80% of it. I mean,
Right.
most of it, it's online learning, it's all through, Zoom and sort of, so the courses are all online. The community portion of it is largely online through Slack and, kind of group chat. And then the last piece of it, the last 20% is in-person event experiences, and that of course is not online. But that's still just about a fifth of it. Most of it is online.
Right. So what is the technology used to, you mentioned a couple of tools like Slack and chat. Do you have a technology or use a technology where the community gathers online? Is there any?
I mean, one of the craziest things about our company, given the success we've had, is that there's still nowhere to go. But in 2 weeks there will be. But as of today, there's nowhere to go to log into that we own, that we built. Right. There's no username and password. The first thing that happens when you sign up for Pavillion is you get a login for Slack. And that's really like where the community is housed. And, I'm embarrassed to say it, but also proud, because we built, a $20 million business without having any kind of software at all that we've developed. But we're building our own platform now because it's breaking, and because Slack is not the right way to organize community. And we need our own tools, and we didn't want to just use a third-party tool off the shelf, because I want to build a valuable business and we need to own some of the code ourselves. So we are building Pavillion Digital for the first time. That'll go into testing again, like I said, in 2 weeks, and we'll have the opportunity to log into it. The foundation of it will be taking classes. The foundation of it will be gamified, almost not, the vision, the long-term vision is like Duolingo for sales and marketing training. It is, what is, to your point about challenges, what are the ways that we can continuously reinforce the skills and the techniques and the tactics that you're learning on an almost daily basis. But so anyway, so that's what we're building.
I think that's a great move, because the challenge is building a community on a third-party platform such as Facebook groups. Meta's going to keep changing the bloody rules all the time, and then you're going, and they don't give a shit about you. All they care about is making money. So I think taking control, again, another independence, taking control moment, which is great. So I look forward to hearing more about how that technology and platform goes. But getting control of having control of the community platform, I think, is a really great move, and I totally get why you're doing it. And hats off to you for building it in Slack. I think that's quite amazing.
Yeah, I mean, it's started to break down, but nevertheless, it's been pretty crazy. But like you said, Jeff, we don't have the time to go into it, but it's been a very long journey of building our own platform, and I'm super, super excited that we're going to be shipping some actual product in the next 2 weeks, which is great.
Awesome. I'm mindful of we've got a hard stop coming up. So just to wrap it up, what are some of the most important things that you'd like to share with the audience that you've learned along the way, as a grumpy old bastard that left corporate behind and started his own business and found out where he really does have joy? What are some of the top insights you'd like to share that you've learned along the way that made a difference in your life?
Well, I mean, I wrote a book about it. So, the top insight I will share is the title of the book, which is that you mentioned this earlier, right? Everybody thinks that the way that they succeeded is the only way to succeed. So, Donald Trump or whomever, it doesn't matter. And I don't even have a point of view. I mean, I do, but it's not relevant here. But everybody so you'll meet a lot of people out there that tell you that you got to be a heartless bastard. It's a dog eat dog world. You got to get them before they get you. Don't leave money on the table. You got to make sure you extract fair value for every transaction, every negotiation. You got to make sure that you get what's fair. Don't get screwed over. There's this us versus them mentality. And my point is, and what I would share with people regardless of if you buy my book. Of course, I would love it if you did. But many benefits are available to people that make bulk orders. But the point is, the point is that there is a different way. There is a different way, and I realize I'm not statistically significant. I haven't done a scientific study, and maybe I have some skills or innate advantages that maybe people out there listening don't have. But I can tell you that my life changed dramatically when I stopped thinking about life so transactionally, and when I set out intentionally to try and help people without expecting anything in return, and really trying to play a long game and not need to be paid every single time I offered assistance or support. And you look different, you accumulate power and influence, because somebody that can help lots of people is somebody that can help lots of people, right? Is somebody that is a helper that you go to when you need help. And it really changed the trajectory of my life when I started thinking about, what can I do to just start making infinite deposits into the karmic bank without requiring any kind of withdrawal. And good things just started happening. So, that's the message.
I think that's awesome and inspiring. So in other words, you gave your gift to the world and the world is giving you back. And I think that is a great way to live. And it's a great place where joy rises as well. Thank you very much, Sam, for your time and insights. It's been an absolute pleasure to have you on the Jeff Bullis Show. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jeff, and I appreciate it. And if folks want to chat to me, you can email me, sam@joinpavillion.com. And the book is called Kind Folks Finish First.
Thank you. And go and read it. It's actually a great read. I'm about 1/3 the way through the book. So, it's great. Great stories, great insights. And I've got more to learn from you within the pages of the book, where you've actually taken what's in your mind and put it on paper.
I'm living my life's lessons here.
You are. And thank you very much for putting it down and sharing it with the world. Thank you very much.
Thank you.